the Ultimate Warrior, and eventually WrestleMania 6 in 1990, he becomes world champion. What was kind of your dealings with him? Because he is such a unique guy, and I feel like if your talent relations and you're dealing with the Ultimate Warrior, something tells me he's going to be a little bit different to deal with than some of the other guys.
I think to say that he was high strung would be an understatement. but he also was he was a very unique talent that if somebody had the idea of saying, well, I'm going to create this guy who's got an athletic body, not really a great mechanical wrestler, but he's got the body, and we're going to put armbands with stringers down his biceps and have him run to the ring like a wild man. He has to create that himself, and then you watch it, and you watch the response to the people, and it was obvious that and we've talked about this at various times over the weeks, the it factor. And if you ask me again, how do you define the it factor? Well, I can't define it. I've struggled over years to try and write down what the it factor is. The only thing I can tell you is a talent either has it or they don't, and it's something that you can't teach somebody or pass on to somebody. They either have it or they don't.
What were your thoughts on Warrior? You thought he definitely had it?
There was something. Yes, he had it. There was something that the fans gravitated to him because he was not a polished performer. He was somebody that would go out there and couldn't give you long matches because he was so high energy. I mean, his music would hit and he would bust through that curtain and he would run to the ring with his streamers, and then he would get in the ring and he would bounce from rope to rope to rope, and then he'd go to a rope and he would shake it like a wild man. I mean, he had his own thing that made him different than everybody else, and his matches didn't go real long, but he electrified the audience, and that's really what you can't ignore. You say, and he's got it. The people are the judge and jury. They're responding to it. Okay, how do we get the most out of this? And that's the challenge of being creative and being in charge of talent management.
What did you think about promos?
He would do promos, and for me, I was always a storyteller. So there was a story that I told with every promo. I would listen to him promo, and when he was done, if you asked me what he had just said, I could tell you I don't know. but we laugh about it, but he just electrified and mesmerized people and just was this unique character, and he couldn't be a traditional wrestler in that his interviews were important into talking people into the seats. You had to get there other ways by creating an issue between him and somebody else, but that's what made him unique, and maybe that's what the people saw in him and why they were so supportive of him, because he was
He was so charismatic. He definitely was very
charismatic.
Over.
That's the word that I forgot. Yes, that's the word that really best describes him. He was charismatic.
What did you think about him behind the scenes? Was he as crazy behind the scenes as he was in front of the camera?
I would call him unorthodox. He was different, but I always got along with him.
The thing with Warrior is you always hear stories about him being difficult. And was he difficult at all? Because I know, obviously, at SummerSlam 91, there was a bit of an issue, and Vince even says, he couldn't have waited to fire him as soon as he walked backstage, and he wanted more money going out, and then all of a sudden, Vince agreed, and then, so what was the whole situation there? Was that a difficult situation?
It was difficult in the sense that it was not a very professional move or a very smart move on the part of a Warrior. You don't take Vince and hold him up for money on any one given night. Because if you think about it, the first time that Vince said okay and adheres to the demand and lets it go, what that scenario is going to happen again and again and again. And then if you don't draw the line the first time, it's going to kill your business. And so it doesn't matter about who the talent is or how important they are or how hot they are at the time. But if they hold you up that night, you don't have any choice. They're there. They're in the arena. All those people are sitting out there. The house is what the house is. And if you allow that person to hold you up and get away with it, then he controls your business. You don't control it, and you can't survive and let that happen.
Were you shocked that night when he did that? Because you hear it behind the scenes, like, guys, hold up Vince before he goes out to the ring. He's part of a main event, match made in heaven, the match made in hell. He's going to team with Hogan that night. Sid's the referee. You got Adnan Slaughter and the Iron Sheik, a.k.a. Mustafa, on the other side. I mean, he's a big role and a big part of the main event of the night. You shocked that he would pull that?
Surprised that he did not have enough experience to see the big picture, and if he had, he would have understood that he was basically cutting his own throat. You hold him up that night. Yep. What's Vince going to say? No, and you don't go out there. You got the house in there. You got to go out there and get through that night. But then you then cut the tie at that point. And no matter how much you got invested in them or how over they are, the minute that you let them dictate to you and you let them get away with it, and there's no price to pay for it, you might as well kiss your business goodbye. And most guys know that. They can say, okay, if I'm going to hold the guy up tonight, and I'm going to get probably a lot more money than I would have otherwise. But most guys think, well, what about next week and the week after and the week after? And don't realize that, okay, hey, oh, wow, I got 3 times what I could have because I held Vince up. And don't think about, this guy's been in promotion. He's the 3rd generation, and he's still in business because he didn't allow this situation to happen and to get by with it. But a lot of guys just don't. I don't want to go and say they're not smart, but I guess they're not smart when they do something like that. Yeah, they did something that night, but at what cost? Because it probably cost them a lot more, where they would have been better off in their position if they'd kind of adhered to norms like they should have been.
What was it like backstage when the match is over and he comes back through and Vince fires him? Was it like pandemonium? Was it just Vince was pissed off and that was the end of it? Like, what happened backstage that night?
I think he was shocked, and then it's okay. Nothing in the wrestling business shocked me, and if that happened, I knew that Vince had no choice, had to do what he had to do. Then it was immediately, okay, we got to think about tomorrow and the day after next week and try to figure out the best way to regroup and, keep business going.
Yeah, him and Hogan at this point were the kind of the 2 babyface stars, and eventually, obviously the things change and War ends up going back at WrestleMania 8, and which is a few months later, and Vince, I guess, forgives him and whatever. Is that one of those things where anything is forgivable in the wrestling business? Warrior can come back even after he pulled that shenanigans. Vince will still bring him back. As long as you're a good business, it's okay, and eventually things will work themselves out.
Well, the fact that Vince cut ties that night. Here's a guy that made a demand and held him up for money before he went out there, and then was finished as of that night. So he goes home and it's like, okay, I'm looking on this given night what more I got than I would have otherwise, but I lost everything going forward. So was it such a smart move? And you got to let guys go through that and experience it. And then maybe 5 years goes by and he comes back and the guy comes back with his tail between his legs, and it's like I learned my lesson. I realized that it was more than just holding you up for what compensation I got for that night, and what did I forfeit as a result of making that decision that day, and it was very stupid of me to do that. And most guys then figure it out.
And it's only basically 6 months or so later, Vince ends up bringing back Warrior for WrestleMania 8, and it's just kind of surprising, just that return, because you didn't see it coming. Kind of a weird placement. Hulk and Sid in the main event that night. Papa Shango comes out. They're double teaming Hulk after the DQ, and then Warrior makes a surprise appearance. Huge pop, of course. That long entranceway that he ran down. He was probably exhausted by the time he got in the ring.
Yeah.
It definitely looked like it. Was that just kind of like one of those things like, okay, Warrior's good business, we need him back, and obviously Hulk is on his way out as he's trying to go a little bit into Hollywood, he's going to be doing some movies, and he's going to step away for a bit. Is that one of those things where Vince is like, okay, I'll forgive you, you're good business, we need you back, and you're going to be one of the top baby faces?
The business is full of stories about where guys got second chances. And if he was any kind of a smart businessman, he would understood that what he did that night, he paid a price for, because the umbilical cord was cut that night, and all that he could have made going forward. Here's a guy who's not booked as of that next day. And okay, he has a name for himself or whatever, and he, a guy like that is a talent that is always going to find a place to go, because there's always a territory that's down that is looking for something like that. But most guys figure it out that to do that, especially to somebody like Vince McMahon, it just isn't a good business decision.
As far as